Hello War Thunder players. If you're here, it's very clear that you're here to learn how to fly sim, and I'm here to teach it to you. My first suggestion here would be go into a test flight with the Hurricane Mark 1L. It's one of the easiest monoplanes to fly in War Thunder. You're going to use it to learn how to do takeoffs, landings, and adjust your trim. So let's get started. Okay, I'm going to teach you how to fly with a control stick, but for this first lesson I will be giving tips on the mouse and keyboard controls as well. I know not everyone has a controller at their disposal, but I really do suggest getting a controller. A controller is going to make you do everything better except possibly getting your guns on target, but you won't even be able to get your guns in a position to get on target, I feel, unless you have a stick to... Sorry, those trucks are getting loud. A stick to control your movements in a much more controlled way. Okay, so we're sitting on the runway. We're going to start our engine by pressing the I for ignition. Okay, a lot of players don't understand that the propeller, as it spins, not only produces the thrust to move the airplane forward, but a torque effect that rotates the aircraft, because it is a spinning object. Now what that does is it'll turn your aircraft on the ground really badly because you're going so slow that there's not enough wind passing over the control surfaces to keep it very straight. So that means we are going to have to apply a lot of rudder as we take off. Now, most aircraft are going to want to turn to the left when you take off, but that is not true for every aircraft. So if you're ever going to fly an aircraft in sim in a battle, make sure you know what it's like and what it's going to do before you go in and start playing, so you don't waste your team's resources. Okay, I'm going to apply about 3/4 right rudder, and for those playing on keyboard, Q and E are your rudder control surfaces, so you're going to want to press E. And as you go down the runway, you're going to want to make small adjustments left and right with the rudder to make sure that you stay straight down the runway. So we're just going to bump it straight up to 100%. Added a little bit too much rudder there, and we're going to straighten it back out. Now that I'm going, I don't need much rudder. I don't even need takeoff flaps for this fine beauty of an aircraft. We can just pull right up into the air. We'll get our gear up. And voila, you've taken off. Now this Hurricane is the easiest aircraft to fly, take off, land. It's a great learning tool. Keep that in mind. So it's going to get harder with different aircraft, and I'll show you an example here in a little bit. But right now we're just going to focus on getting our speed up. I'm going to climb up to about 500 meters and gain some speed. Okay. We're at 500 meters now, just over it actually. Gain some speed, then we're going to work on trim. So trim basically sets the control surfaces of the aircraft in a set position so that you don't have to constantly apply pressure under the stick, because right now I'm pointing the stick down and to the right to keep the aircraft from rolling and pitching up. So if I just let go, it starts to pull up and rotate over to the left. So let's get this pointed down in the right direction again. Okay, so I've got the aircraft pretty much holding straight and level. There we go. And I'm going to press page up, which I believe is a custom keyboard setup for setting trim. It might be in the presets. And there you go, you see on the bottom it's changed the aileron and elevated trim. And now this is hands off. I'm not pushing on the stick at all. Looks like we've still got just a little bit of upward pitch, so I'm going to point it down a little bit. Make a small adjustment. Whoop. Come on now. And there we go. I'm giving it no input right now, and it's flying straight and true. This is going to really help you in combat, especially in dogfights, since you won't have to take the plane's natural pitch and roll into account when you're also fighting the enemy and doing combat maneuvers, such as rolls and dips, dives, and what have you. Now it's also important to know that as you change your throttle level, it's also going to change the amount of torque the engine produces. So if you're in combat and you're going to have to cut throttle, your plane is going to start to change roll and pitch directions. So we're going to slow back down to about our cruising speed here since we did a dive. Okay, and I'm going to cut throttle here just to show you what it is. I've got my hands off the stick right now. We've got it trimmed to fly nice and level, and I'm going to cut throttle. See, now the plane wants to roll over to the right. So if you're going to fly at 0% throttle, such as when we go into land, we're going to have to retrim the aircraft to make it a lot easier on you. So we're going to get ready to go into land, but before we do, I'm going to give you some tips here. You're always going to want to approach with your combat flaps out, which means you can't be going too fast, or you will blow out the flaps. You want to come in steep enough that you only have to apply somewhere between 20 to 50% throttle to keep your current speed. Now I'm dropping speed and altitude at the same time just so I can get down quickly enough to get lined up for this runway. Another thing is, when you're coming into land, you want to go too fast rather than too slow, because if you go too slow, you fall out of the sky and you land in the trees. And you can always cut your speed lower, but gaining speed may cause your aircraft to pitch violently because of the added torque and flip over at low speed, so you really want to be careful with that. So I'm lining up for the runway here. I've got my combat flaps out. Now that I've lined up with the runway, I'm going to adjust my throttle to keep speed. I'm going to put out my gear. It's going to add some drag, and so we're going to add some more throttle. We're going to slowly let the speed go down a little bit. This has a very low stall speed. We're going to put the landing flaps out. That's going to add a bunch more drag, so we're going to need to put the throttle a little more. I've come in a little too shallow, but that's okay. We want to keep our throttle moving so that we can keep our speed constant. There we go, we're at a good speed. We're approaching the runway beautifully. I'm having to fight our trim because I forgot to change the trim before I made an approach, but it's such a small amount of change that it's not that bad. Once I hit the end of the runway, I'm going to slowly drop throttle down to 0%, make the adjustment for the torque. I'm going to float the airplane over the runway as long as I can. There we go. And we've set it down nice and easy. I'm going to hold brake and come to a stop. You can use your guns to slow down. Oh, you can use your guns to slow down a little bit. The bigger your guns, the more you slow down. And always keep in mind that sometimes holding the brake will cause the nose to tip down into the ground, so you want to watch out for that. Usually it won't cause too much of a problem, but sometimes you will flip over even more and destroy your aircraft. So there's your basics on taking off, trimming, and landing. I'm going to hop into a different aircraft and give you another example of how it can get more difficult and harder to fly. Okay, players. We're going to try taking off and landing in a more difficult aircraft to fly. I've chosen the FW-190A5 as my example. Now, this aircraft has a lot of power, it's got a radial engine, and it produces a lot of torque, and it has a pretty bad tendency to come around and bite you if you put too much pitch input or roll input into it. It's a very temperamental aircraft, but we're going to conquer it, guys. We're going to do it. So we're going to sit inside, we're going to start the engine again with I. Now this aircraft does have a lot of torque, as I just said. We're going to apply a lot more rudder. Another thing about this aircraft is it has very limited trimming capabilities. You can only trim the pitch on this aircraft. You can't trim the yaw or the roll with the ailerons and the rudder. So, in preparation for taking off, we are going to apply full right rudder. Now this is going to be a little bit too much, but as we crank the engine up to 100%, it is going to violently kick just a little bit as we power up here. So, as we go down the runway, we're going to be ready to make small and many adjustments. Another issue with this plane is it likes to rotate counterclockwise, and there's no trim you can do to offset that. So as we go down the runway, we're going to have to apply rightwards pressure on the stick. So not only we're going to have to do rudder, we're going to have to do aileron control at the same time. So without further ado, here we go. Now I'm giving it somewhere between 3/4 and full rudder. I keep bouncing back and forth just to try to keep it straight. You always want to look to your left and right at the ground and see if you can keep the runway in sight. See, we started tipping over to the left. I fixed that. We're going to throw out takeoff flaps at the last minute. And there we go. Now we're up off the ground. We're going to raise the flaps into gear. Now I'm having to apply rightwards pressure on the stick this entire time because if I let go of the stick, it pretty badly wants to rotate over to the left. Now, that's a known characteristic of the 190, and there's not much you can do about it. There's no... Wait a minute, there's trim. What? Hang on a second, it might be my birthday. Normally this thing does not have trim. If I remember correctly, it might just be in test flights that this thing has trim. But, yeah, we're just going to roll with it. We're going to leave that at 0 so that we can prepare you for when you're in the battle. So yeah, this has no aileron trim in battles, yet in test flight it does, which is kind of strange. So we're giving real gentle inputs into the stick so that we don't stall this thing too badly. It is quite a handful at all times. Pretty much the complete opposite of the Hurricane we were flying earlier. I'm going to circle around one more time and prepare to land. As you might have seen, we had to take off at a much higher speed than the Hurricane. This thing is much heavier. I think the wings are a little bit shorter as well. But so that also means that we're going to have to come in at a faster speed. But that won't be a problem. So there's the runway. I think I'm going a bit too fast. I'm going to cut throttle here all the way. I'm going to put out the takeoff flaps. We don't have combat flaps, we have takeoff flaps. And let's see what our speed is as we approach the runway. Okay, we're gaining speed pretty rapidly as we approach the runway. We're going to abort the landing. We're going to come in much too fast and either damage our aircraft or overshoot the runway. So we're just going to pull up our flaps and add a little throttle, turn around, and try again. There's no shame in calling off a landing and going to try again. It only means you're ready to go back with a non-damaged aircraft. So I'm looking around for the runway. There it is. We're going to throw out the takeoff flaps. Okay, looks like our speed's going to be fine. We're going to make the final turn here. We're going to throw out the landing gear. We are losing a little bit of speed and altitude, so I'll add more throttle. Now as you come into land, especially with these heavier aircraft, you do not want to use the gun sight as a vector for where your plane is going to go. Your gun sight is for where your guns are going to shoot, not for where your plane is going to be. You want to fly your plane based on the scenery around you, not through the gun sight. We're going to come in, we're going to float it over the runway as long as we can. There we go, nice and easy. We're going to hold the brakes. This thing slows down like no other with the guns. There we go. Now you can see that that was a little bit more of a handful to deal with, but the more you practice, the more you get used to it, the easier it'll be and the more times you can do it. Now one final tip I'm going to give you for especially you controller users, I'm going to go to right here. These are the ones I'm going to have to ask you to change. Your roll, pitch, and yaw sensitivity. Pitch sensitivity is the elevator that moves your plane up and down. With too sensitive of an elevator, it's going to make it very, very easy for you to stall out and fall out of the sky as you make a tight turn. So I would recommend turning this pitch sensitivity down, not all the way down, but maybe 10 to 15% down. I've got mine turned down. I think it was up here at 75% earlier, and I had it at around 60 or so. It allows me to have more control when trying to do tight turns, and a lot easier to not flip out of the sky and crash, if that makes sense. So yeah, with those tips and the first lesson complete, we can move on to the second lesson. I will see you then.